Well, thanks so much, Sammy. I've been really looking forward to having you on the podcast for actually, yeah, since I sort of reached out to you. I think you've got a lot of value to add to our audience. But thanks for joining me today.
Oh, Ben, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm stoked to be here to have this conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, the first question we always kick off with is tell us a bit about your family.
Yeah. So my family is tiny. My immediate family is myself and my beautiful husband, Nathan, and we live in New South Wales, inner West Sydney. And then my wider, still tiny family, my mum and my grandparents and my brother are in South Australia. My brother just got engaged, actually. So I'm going to get a sister. And then on my husband's side, I've got I'm very lucky. I've still got grandparents on that side as well. Nate's mum and dad, 3 siblings. They're all married, and a couple of nieces and nephews.
How good. There you go.
Yeah.
And tell me about some of the things you and Nathan like to do together.
So we got together in 2007. So we've been together a little over 14 years now. And what we like to do together has evolved as we've evolved. We met at high school, but didn't start dating until a couple of years out of school. And we went through our very poor student uni years together as housemates. And then we fell in love accidentally. Some of the things that we really love to do are experiential. So we both really love traveling. I've been lucky enough to go to more than 30 countries now. And I think I've done about, maybe 15 or so of those with Nate. So travel's a really big one outside of pandemic times. We normally jump on a plane a couple of times a year. And then we're big on going to live music, festivals and events, those kinds of things that we really love to do. Both big foodies, but we also both really like to cook. So we get to kind of splurge on some good food, but then kind of take it a little bit budget by doing it ourselves.
Yeah, how good. And I've seen some of the results of that on Facebook. So it looks tasty.
Yeah, food is, I'll talk about food all day if you want to go there, Ben.
Awesome. And then I guess this is kind of, I feel like this is sort of your expertise that we're going to find out a little bit more as the podcast goes through. But tell us a bit about the rhythms that you and Nathan have to maintain a healthy relationship.
Yeah, so we've kind of got 6 key ingredients that help us keep a healthy, happy, thriving relationship. And they've evolved over time, but they've definitely kind of been the staples. So the first one starts at an annual level where every year, generally in November, towards the end of like the season, so just before summer kicks in, we do an annual game plan day. Where we dig into what is our priorities for the next 365 days. Wow. And we kind of map out like, when are the long weekends? When do we want to take vacations? Like, have we got any big milestone, like weddings or events or things that are outside of our control? Get them in the diary first. And then we figure out like, what are the big priorities? Like, is this year about traveling? Is it about saving? Is it about building something? Is it about one of us like really investing in development of a skill or learning something or going for a new promotion or seeking something more in our career or business? But we do, a pretty intensive day, sometimes 2 days, to just check in on like, where are we at for our big vision of our life and what's the next 12 months about to help us achieve that. So that's our annual game plan, which is actually coming up in a couple of weeks. So kind of getting excited.
Not far away.
So for that process last year or this year, we set 21 goals for 2021. And then we've kind of spent all year working away at them. So then at a quarterly level, each season at the change of season, sort of like end of weekend, at that change of season, we just check in on like, how are those 21 goals for 2021 or whatever it might be going, and what is the priority for the next kind of 90 days. We found in years gone past, this kind of evolved because when we moved from South Australia to New South Wales, we had probably a year, maybe 2, where we just were bombarded with visitors and social events that all kind of happened in this kind of gridlock of window. And we were just burning ourselves out trying to maintain our normal lives of getting ourselves to work with clean clothes and food in the fridge for the week, but our weekends were packed back to back to back, and I reckon we burnt ourselves out, and we went, we need a better way, like we need a better way to do this because this cannot keep happening. So we found that we check in kind of every 90 days to do this high level look at like what's coming up in the next 90 days. Like, is there anything that we need to prepare for now that's maybe slipped under the radar that we need to pull up the agenda, whether or not it's like on finance or on time, or if one of us is traveling for work, any of those kinds of things. And then at a monthly level, we generally just do a quick tank check. So I'm going to talk about that in a sec, but we've got this concept of the 8 different fuel tanks that kind of cover the whole area of our lives, the fuel tanks that make up our life. So we do a quick, temperature check on how full those various tanks are. And then, sorry, Ben.
Is that every month?
Yeah, we do that monthly, and it's super quick. We normally do it over, like, go out for brunch or something like that. We can do it while we're walking the dog because we've been doing it for so long now. Like, it's a pretty organic kind of conversation. It didn't start out like that. It's definitely evolved over time. But yeah, it's definitely about getting us back on the same page, especially if one of us is like struggling with one of those areas of life. Like if something's been like, oh, that's feeling really hard and heavy, and it's been consistently like that, it kind of allows us to bring it to the top of the surface and an awareness more often, so it doesn't get so depleted before the alarm bells start going off. It's kind of like an early detection opportunity.
Yeah, great. And I think we'll find out more. I've got so many questions on that, but cool. That's exciting.
Yeah. So that's our first kind of 3. And then number 4 is our 2x2x2 date night. So we kind of do this every other week. So the way that Nathan and I do this is that in the first half of the month, he'll take responsibility for organizing a date. And then in the back half of the month, I take responsibility for organizing a date. So it's not on a fix, like it's not every second Friday or anything like that. It's just sometime in the first half of the month, sometime in the second half of the month. And then that way we both get the opportunity to be the host and also the guest. So we found that works really well for us. We've probably been doing it for a few years now, but we used to just like, I'm the organized one. I'm the calendar looking one. You can tell, like, I like a system.
Yeah.
Even though my husband's an engineer, like he should be thriving on the systems and the processes and the step by steps.
Even in your background, I can see that the books are ordered in color. It's
methodical. Yeah. So, but I used to find that I was the one who was booking the concert tickets, finding out about that cool event or restaurant, or organizing the weekend away or whatever it was. Like I was always the activator and the instigator to creating those experiences for us and for our relationship, that element of fun and play and adventure, which is so important. But yeah, a few years ago, it kind of got to like, well, Nath, when was the last time you took me on a date? I organize these things for us all the time. We need to find a better way to sort of divide and conquer so that we both get the opportunity to inhale and exhale. And I think creating that framework or that, I guess that rule for our relationship has given Nath so much more empowerment to just like look in the diary and book things. And it's kind of nice. It's a bit dorky, but like I love seeing a calendar invite to date night, and then we normally do a few little descriptor secret words that kind of might allude to what it is, but not necessarily give it away. So it's kind of nice.
So they are surprised as well, most of them?
Yeah, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Like when it's a band or a gig that one of us is likely to go, oh my God, we've got to get tickets to that. Someone will go, well, I've already got them. But yeah, sometimes it is surprise. So this 2x2x2 thing we picked up from a Reddit thread, like this dark, obscure place of the internet. And the original concept was like, 2 dates a month. And every 2 months go for a weekend away, and then every 2 years go for a holiday or a vacation together. So we kind of adapted it to make it our own. But yeah, then the second two is to go for a weekend away. We have struggled big time with this one this year because we haven't been able to go anywhere. And then it's felt like, oh, we're going to go for a weekend away. What, in our neighborhood, like within our 5K, like that feels really silly. So we've struggled with that one this year. And same for the third two of going for a trip away. So we've got some in the bank that I think we need to use up. But yeah, the premise is making conscious time for play and fun and romance in our relationship. And then number 5 is at a like weekly level. So we call this our happy hour. This has been adapted from like a few books of relationship coach and therapists, some guests that we had on our podcast. But basically we've got like a 10 question kind of agenda that we run through on a Sunday night. And it's both like practical and tactical of like, who's doing the food shopping this week? How's the money at? Are we enjoying the sex that we're having? Like what's going on there? But then there's also like, how connected do you feel to me this week? Like, how was your week? Was it a good one? Was it a bad one? And one of the most poignant questions, which was really uncomfortable in the beginning, is there anything you'd like me to apologize for?
That's huge. Hey.
Yeah. And it was uncomfortable in the beginning because it was like, I'm about to open myself to some feedback here that I might not be ready to receive. Yeah. But it's such a gift. And I would encourage all couples to kind of implement that. Like, is there anything you'd like me to apologize for? Because I find that sometimes in the heat of the moment, it wasn't a big thing. And then you've had some time to like ruminate on it and you're like, oh, well, it wasn't a big thing. So I don't feel like I can bring it up, but also it's still bothering me days later. So you kind of get stuck in that, I guess, that chatter loop in your own head. And when they're small things, they can layer on top of one another. Yeah. So one of the great examples that's come out of this is I had been very playfully teasing Nath about something that he did. And I thought it was all in jest and fun. And he raised it one Sunday night and he was like, look, something I would like you to apologize for is you teasing me about this thing. And of course, now that I know he's upset about it, I'm not going to share it with you. But I never would have known. I would have gone on forever thinking that it was this fun, playful inside joke that he was totally taking on the chin. And each time I was making that joke, it was cutting a little deeper. So yeah, what can I apologize for? But yeah, that happy hour. And then we just get organized for the week. Like, what's the priority? Is there anything that's going on that's out of the ordinary? Like, if we got major to-dos, is someone working late? Is someone working early? Have we got events that we're attending or hosting, or we have a business together? So is there stuff going on there that we really need to prioritize? And then at a daily level, number 6, we practice an attitude of gratitude. So as we're getting ready for bed, we do a conversation about what are you most grateful for today? What are the 2 or 3 things that, you want to be appreciative for? And I find that this is such a great way to get a good sense of what kind of day or where Nate's headspace is at. Because you find sometimes it's really easy you're flush with gratitude, grateful for everything, grateful for the bed you're about to get into, the fact that you had toothpaste, that you had a clean glass of water, that you had some delicious food, or like it can be like so easy to come up with. And then other days it's a struggle where you're just like, oh, everything just feels hard and heavy and I don't feel very appreciative or grateful for anything. But yeah, the trick is to then ask like, well, why are you grateful for that thing? And really marinate in the appreciation.
Yeah, no, that is so good. And my next question might give the audience some context to why I feel like it's awesome. And I'm not saying this in a negative way, but that is so organized and a proactive way to approach your relationship. That's fantastic. But can you talk us through your career journey up until starting your business?
Yeah, so this might help connect the dots of why it's so organized. Yeah. So I left high school with not not a solid plan by any means. I actually worked in the fitness industry for a little while. My intention was personal trainers get paid 60, $70 an hour. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to work mornings and nights when I don't have to be at uni or at TAFE. And I'm going to get a far better hourly rate than my mates who are working retail or at the bar. The thing that screwed me though was that I also wanted to be at the bar on Friday night and not out teaching a boot camp lesson on Saturday morning with all my other 19-year-old friends. Yep. So I worked in the fitness industry for a little while, and then I, in my, I guess, gap year. And then I had a spanner thrown in my plans, which turned out to be the shape of my husband, because I landed a job on a cruise ship to work in the fitness industry. And it was kind of in the few months before I was due to leave that Nathan and I had made this very clumsy, awkward transition from housemates to in love, and like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? We've been friends for such a long time. Like, are we about to mess all of this up? So I decided to stay. And then I went, okay, well, I'm not going to spend another year or two working in the fitness industry. I'm happy to do that, but this is not the long-term plan. And then I ended up heading to TAFE for a year for costume and textile design. I thought I wanted to work in the fashion industry. Turns out I did not. But in that year, I got the opportunity to volunteer on a whole heap of fashion industry events. And a fire was lit inside of me about organizing events and the complexity of project management, specifically for events which had an engaged audience. So yeah, then I pivoted my studies and went and did project management, specializing in events. And did that for a little while. I had a really hard time breaking into the industry. I am in that sweet spot of millennial who entered the workforce right at GFC. So I had a really hard time, and I did a few other like very random kind of jobs in that time. I worked in hospitality, in banquets and weddings and hotels, and I did some time in recruitment, working in ad hoc labor hire, trying to get into events through that direction. And then from there I spent a few years working in traditional recruitment for trade. And then I was unexpectedly made redundant. And this is sucky. It was 1 day shy of 1 year. So I was not entitled to anything. And I showed up to work one day and I did not have a job the next day. And I'd just come back from holidays too. So I had no leave or anything. And I was like early 20s. It was not good. So I took the opportunity to head overseas for about 3 months. Nathan and I had a trip to Europe booked, and I kind of just had this weird patch of time where I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go and try and get a job and then ask them to give me this time off? Am I going to go and temp? Like, am I just going to burn this time and deal with it in 4 months and like run all my savings into the ground? So Nathan and I had the heart to heart of like, hey, when we first got together, I had this big overseas adventure planned for myself by myself. Can I take that kind of adventure now? So I ended up going to Vietnam for a couple of months and teaching English as a second language, which was an incredible experience. And it probably shaped a lot of what has then happened, or what the decisions that I've made in my life kind of moving forward. So when I got home, so I did the sort of 3 months in Vietnam, did a lot of soul searching, did a lot of probably growing as an individual young person. And then Nathan and I went on the planned Europe trip. And then I eventually got back to Adelaide, and I'd been away from Australia for like maybe 5 months or so, and not just Australia, but like my hometown. And we got back there and I was like, I just don't see my life here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. I definitely don't want to be working in recruitment. That was definitely not the plan. I don't want to go and get another job in recruitment. Like, I need to get into the events industry at a much larger scale. And I just can't see that happening in Adelaide. So we kind of had the conversation, and Nath had been in his career, in he'd gone from his graduate placement, he got an offering, he stayed at the same place, he'd been employed in that same field for sort of like 5 years already. Wow. While I was still like trying to get in the door. Yeah, but we just had the conversation of like, all right, have a couple more cracks here in Adelaide. If it doesn't work out, we'll move. We'll open the floodgates to a bigger picture. So we did that. And I came second for like 2 or 3 more roles. And I was like, that's it, I'm out. Look, where are we going? Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane? And then we just decided that whoever got a job first, wherever they got a job first, that's what we'd do. Yep. So I landed a job in an events and marketing agency in Sydney. And I made the move first. And I was here maybe like 6 months before Nath followed. So then we kind of did the long distance thing for a little bit. Yeah. And then I worked in event management in agency, and then in-house for a training and education development company. And then I realized that I didn't want to be an event manager forever, and took a very strong pivot and realized that a lot of my project management skills were actually very strongly versed to leading a team and leading a business. So I invested pretty quickly in leveling up some of my leadership. I got some coaching and took some extra courses and things, and stepped up in the business that I was in, away from events and into product development and taking care of community and team. And then I stepped up into my big job as GM. And I did that for a little while. And then it was time to fly the coop. And then I did some freelance project consulting sort of stuff for teams and products and program delivery. And now I have 3 businesses, which kind of happened, I say by accident, because I never saw myself as a business owner and entrepreneur. Like, I spent years hanging out with business owners and I just couldn't see myself in those shoes. And now I'm in them. I can't imagine not being in them.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. That's a powerful realization.
Was that a little bit? That's probably a very long, detailed story, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's great. Again, I'm enjoying it. So just walk us through each of the 3 businesses. Like, what does each do? Because I think I'd love to ask a question on one that's unplanned.
Yeah. So I count one is I still do some freelance consulting. So if you want to book Sammi Jaeger to work on a project, I have the luxury of working with only people that I really like and businesses that I really care about. And I'm really great at working with founders who have a really big idea, but they aren't quite clear on how to unpack it. So if I love sitting down with a founder and asking them the 100 questions that they need to identify those first 100 steps, and then equipping either their team or outlining what they might need in a team to make that big idea happen. So I still do a little bit of that. And then business number 2 is independent executives, where we have a talent pool of really talented consultants and coaches who are familiar with the entrepreneurial operating system. And then we place them into businesses who have that seat missing. And it's an incredible way to fill a talent gap at a business level where perhaps the business isn't at a revenue size where they can afford a full-time player at that level, but they need one. So they can have one sort of step in for at a fractional level. And then business number 3 is Fuel Collective, which I have with my husband, where we empower couples to create and keep thriving relationships.
Yeah, awesome. And actually, my unplanned question is on business number 2, because we use the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS. I think people might also know that as. In our own business. And did you want to give like a bit of a broad overview on what you've seen happen and the transformation you've seen when businesses have actually implemented that sort of system?
Yeah. So the entrepreneurial operating system was born from this book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Ben, this book changed my life. I literally keep it on my desk every day.
Is that copies behind you as well?
Yeah, there's copies behind me, along with sister book Rocket Fuel, Gino Wickman and Mark C. Winters. But basically the idea is that every business needs an operating system of some sort, and there's plenty of them, like scaling up or gazelles or whatever you kind of want to choose. But Traction is built on a series of tools and ideas that you implement in your business to keep it running on a consistent rhythm and pulse. It's a way to run your team meetings. It's a way to set your goals for the year. It's a way to have a one sheet plan, what is called like a vision traction organizer. So I've had the very great pleasure of having proximity to a lot of businesses go from not running on any operating system to implementing the entrepreneurial operating system tools in their businesses, and drastically change the way that they do business. And it frees up founders at a rate that it almost leaves them confused, like how they almost get like amnesia, like how was I possibly operating my business without this before? So I'm very lucky that I've had a lot of proximity to the entrepreneurial operating system community here in the APAC region. We've got some incredible implementers who help businesses to take those tools and get them embedded in their business. But one of the key roles that we talk about in the entrepreneurial operating system is the integrator. So it's built on this idea that we have a visionary who's full of ideas. Not all of them great, some of them great. I think it's like the enemy, your newest idea is the worst enemy of your best idea. Like, but yeah, we need those visionaries. Like we need the Elon Musk, we need the Steve Jobs, we need the big thinkers. But those big thinkers often struggle to integrate those ideas across their team to actually get them out of their head and into action or a plan of some sort. Yeah, so that integrator is kind of what you'd probably know as a general manager. They're the person who keeps all of the departments singing and rowing in the same boat at the same time, going in the same direction, and hopefully arriving at the same destination at the same time. So it's a really integral role. The characteristics of that person are very different to a visionary. And often when a founder has started a business and they've scaled, they've been occupying both seats. And it can be really, really hard for that person who's, if they founded the business generally more on the visionary side of things, to do both. And then they do things like run really hard in one direction for one quarter, and then they pivot 180, and then they run really, really hard in another direction for the next quarter, and then they change their mind, and then they head straight ahead for the next quarter. And then meanwhile, behind them, their leadership team and their wider team and business is just whiplashed and confused because they're not necessarily able to articulate why they've changed direction or that shiny object thing. So so independent executives helps businesses who are running on that entrepreneurial operating system to fill that integrator seat when they either aren't ready to have someone in there full time, or they've got someone in there full time who might be either green to leadership or green to the entrepreneurial operating system, or they're at that sort of tipping point where they've got an integrator, but that integrator is also head of marketing, also head of sales, also head of something else, so that they need some external support. So we've got a pool of some really talented people who can slot into those businesses who are really well versed in those tools and help them really run that entrepreneurial operating system.
Fantastic. And that just makes so much sense, what you've done there. And I can see even sort of some of our clients who are looking into the EOS system, or people I also know. That's a bit that's hard to find is those key people to help. Cool. And we'll have in the show notes, we'll have links to the traction book and also Sammy's offering there as well, around getting that help with the implementation. Cool. All righty. Well, yeah, that was a bit of an unplanned one, but
That's all right. We went there.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I'd love to dig into your 8-tank framework. We spoke just a little bit before we went live on it, and it sounds exciting. But did you want to? Yeah, let's start with that relationship stuff.
So Fuel Collective was born after I had seen yet another wave of really good mates go through some pretty shitty breakups and in some cases divorces. And it was around the time that Nathan and I were celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary that this was kind of all happening in our circle of friends. And some people had got married around the same time as us or a little bit later, and they were separating from what they thought was going to be their forever person. And I'm not talking like 1 or 2, Ben, like we had handfuls of them, and it was all kind of this turbulent time. And Nathan and I were just looking at each other like, we are not even 30 yet, and we have more than a handful of friends who are divorcees. Like, not to say that there's anything wrong with getting divorced. It was just the sheer volume that was overwhelming. I don't think that people should stay together forever and ever and ever and ever just because they once upon a time thought that was a good decision. Things do change. But what we were observing was that either one or both of the people in this relationship had never actually seen a healthy, happy, thriving relationship modeled to them. So they were brought up in a home where they probably didn't want to replicate what their parents had shown them, or they'd never actually even examined it. And sometimes it was both people in the relationship. So they'd like gone out, met this person, stepped into love, committed to doing life with them with actually no idea how to.
Yep. And just on that point, something that reminds me of even my own journey, and I share at our Wealth for Life retreats is, if I have a look at stock take, what I've done in terms of years of investment and dollars worth of investment into my career or business, it would be, I think it's sort of coming up to 15 years, and that's excluding school. But there's a lot of time there and hundreds of thousands of dollars into learning and uni and courses, all sorts. It's a mass of investment. And then I, at the time, I was actually going through some struggles with, my wife Stevie, and I share this at our retreats and workshops. But one of the things we discovered is, hey, I formal training. I've invested about 20 hours, and I think it was $40, and that was for the workbook. Doing a marriage course.
Yeah.
I got married, and it was just like, wow, why am I surprised we're here? So what do we do? How do we fix it? So, yeah, tell us your.
Thank you for sharing that, Ben, because I think that it's so blindingly obvious when you zoom back out and you're like, oh, I've literally invested no time, no money, no energy in building this toolbox of skills. Like, I wasn't taught them at school. I wasn't shown them at home. I've met this person and we're just fumbling our way through it. Like, it's, if you were trying to do that with anything else in your life, like if you just decided you were going to build a house with no skills, no tools in your toolbox, like, you wouldn't be surprised if it fell over. Like, yeah. So we were observing this and we're like, why? What is happening here? And from the out, I mean, admittedly, this is from the outside in, but it often looked like there were things that could have been avoided with either some upskilling in relationship skills or some conversations and questions that could have been asked before they'd entered into the relationship, where they just had fundamentally different ideas for what their future was going to look like. And there was, no matter how you sort of blended them together, you were going to end up with some version of huge compromise. But yeah, so we started looking around at the market to go, well, what is there? If you found your person that you want to do life with and you've got long-term intent and your stuff's not broken yet, you're in a good place, but you want to build those resilient relationship skills, where do you go? And we really couldn't find anything. We found a lot of stuff for how to date, how to show up well, how to ask good questions, how to get a second date, how to get a third date, that sort of stuff. We found a tiny little slither, which is probably the workbook that you bought, Ben, just before you got married, that premarital thing, and often is influenced by the church for that premarital kind of counseling. Terrible name to start with. And it's almost too late. Like, you've already made a very big commitment that you're walking down the aisle with this person. There's probably a few things that you want to work out before then. Yeah. And then we found a flood of information and resources for, we've been together a while. The shine is wearing off. We've had kids. Our careers are conflicting. Like, this is way harder than we ever thought. And when it's not meeting our expectations, what do we do about it? Just knowing their love language and their attachment style and their communication preference. It's like, how are we going to manage your career and my career? How are we going to do that? And how are we going to draft a budget or a spendings plan? And what do we want our lifestyle to look like when we're 40 or when we're 50 or when we're 60? Like, then the function of, like, how do we run a household? How do we divvy up all of these tasks that we now need to do this week, next week, the week after that, the week after that? And then the complexity of adding maybe some little people to that as well.
Which is very complex.
Yeah.
There you go. And you know, what you just mentioned there was questions that I've either never asked or never thought to ask, or it's just crazy. So
so we went about unpacking what are the sort of different areas of our own life. And like, we were already running some of those 6 frameworks that I kind of mentioned earlier about, like, we're planning our year, like, when we're planning our year, what are the things that we talk about? What are the things that show up year on year on year? And we ended up with these 8. And this is based on, like, we had so many conversations with, like, friends and network and relationship coaches and therapists and stuff. So it's yourself, your relationship with yourself, really setting the tone for every other relationship that you have.
Yep. So is that one of the tanks?
Yeah, that's one of the tanks. Tank number 2, your romantic relationship. So are you actually taking care of it? Number 3, your relationship and network. So how that next sphere of your relationships with your peers, your colleagues, your friends, your family. Your humming household, like, how is it humming, or is it drawing a lot of your energy and time to make your household run every week? Your careers and business, what opportunities are you looking for, and are you creating them? Your wealth and lifestyle, so how are you spending both your time and your money, and how do you want to be spending your time and your money? The world, so are you plugged into your purpose or your contribution of your time, your energy, your money, your gifts? And then the future, like, do you have some sort of plan or conversation for this elusive future? So we kind of have figured out that at any one time, these 8 tanks can be any level of empty to full. The intent is not that they're running all on full all of the time. And some of them can run on low to empty for a really long time, but it can burn out, and then it can put a stress on the other tanks that need to perform higher, or that you're trying to draw from and fill things up. It's kind of like that idea that, you know, if you talk about, like, the marketing type of self-care, like, take a bubble bath, go shopping, like, go for a massage, like, those kind of self-care things, like, when really what you need is to sit down and have a robust conversation with a coach about your career, because that's the thing that's actually running on empty. That's the thing that is drawing all of your mental energy and is feeling really hard and heavy. So you're not going to fix that by having a bubble bath, like, or you know, you're not. Yeah. And if your romantic relationship is, if every other part of every other tank is great, but your romantic relationship sucks, and you haven't been on a date in you don't know how long, and you haven't had a meaningful conversation with your partner, and you haven't laughed together, like, you're going to be pretty unhappy, and getting another promotion at work isn't going to fix that.
Yeah. Yep. Very cool. Very cool. And so take us through what Fuel Collective does. So what are if someone's listening to the podcast, like how do they interact, or what opportunities are there to learn more about this? Because
Yeah.
it sounds really cool.
So at the very top level, super easy. Come and listen to the podcast. We've got the Date Forever podcast where we chat to couples and experts about the tips and tricks they've found to keep a relationship fueled up. And it's kind of that sweet spot of like expert advice and then couples actually sharing what really works, like, and how they've implemented it. So that's one way. Another way is we have a whole heap of freebies on our website. It's like lots of checklists and some of those meeting agendas that I mentioned earlier, some diagnostic things. So that's fuelcollective.com.au/freebies. Those 8 tanks that I mentioned, we've got a quiz. So there's a 40-point quiz. You can go and diagnose how things are, because you're probably nailing some stuff, but maybe there's some other things that need some work. So you can take the quiz, and that's also on the website. And then, like, in a business sense, we have a online course called Couple and Team, and it's designed to help couples have some conversations that they didn't know that they needed to have. It's totally self-paced, and you can have some of these conversations in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah, that is awesome. I just actually jumped on the website now, and I am blown away with how much stuff you've got there and how it all connects in. I'm so grateful for.
Sounds like you and Stevie needed us a few years ago.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess if anyone hasn't got that sort of stuff or that focus in their relationship, it's it'd be, it's like a business without EOS. I couldn't imagine Inspire without EOS.
Yeah.
Similarly, not
And
stuff.
I know you're interviewing me, Ben, but I want to ask you a question. Like, how hard was everything else in your life at the time when your romantic relationship was in pain?
Yeah, it was not a good time. And even, business was an interesting place. It was still the first few couple of years of Inspire, trying to get that off the ground, which was very interesting on its own.
Mm.
And Stevie also had her final year of uni, with not only just exams and practical theory based stuff. She did practical work experience.
Yeah, she's a vet, right? I
Yeah,
recall. Yeah.
and they've got a horrible final year.
Mm.
When on the weekends and everything, when they're not studying, they're out on the thing. So no time, hardly any money, trying to get the business off the ground.
And that career is like notorious for high suicide rates, not to mention that.
Vet is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's extremely extremely sad. And Stevie's had people she went to uni with and end up as the statistic there. So it's just, it's horrible.
Awful.
Yep. So and so and did that bit of a stock take on, hey, what have I invested into this? And anyway, we went away. Actually, how we kicked things off was we went away on a what I called our first relationship retreat, a couple of hours west of Brisbane, and just spent some time, different frameworks, but just spent some time talking. And actually, the first couple of things we did was said sorry to each other for stuff we knew we buggered up, and also asked for forgiveness. And it was a really powerful weekend. Amazing. And then actually just on the end of that, we set some goals. So travel and lifestyle and career, all that sort of stuff. And that in the years after, we traveled to more countries than we had in the rest of our lives. We built a house, or all sorts of different things. And it's been good. Not always perfect. And I think we can learn heaps from what we shared today.
I love that, Ben. Nathan and I both fundamentally believe that, like, when we have better relationships, we can create a better world, because, like you just said, you can show up as a better person in your business or in your career. You can show up with more meaning and more purpose. You can contribute more. It's really hard to do those things when you and your relationship are in pain. So I applaud you for doing the work and not tossing in the towel.
Yeah. Yep. No, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Alrighty. Well, and so you've mentioned your website, fuelcollective.com.au. We'll pop those in the show notes. Is there any other way that we get in touch with you? Or?
Yeah. If you want to connect with me personally, I like Instagram is probably my favorite platform. So you can find me, Sammi somewhere, Sammi with an I. Yeah, but just reach out, say hello, slide into my DMs, maybe like a little fuel tank so I know where you've come from. Yeah, and say hello. I'm happy to have a chat with anyone about entrepreneurial operating system, about Fuel Collective, about whatever you like, really.
Awesome. Well, very grateful for your time today, Sammi. Thank you. And I hope the audience loves what you said as much as I have.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thank you.